The grand hall of the Dathrian palace fell silent as Queen Vela entered. Her tall, slender form moved with natural grace, iridescent scales shimmering under the light of 3 moons that poured through the crystal windows. The royal council members, 12 of the most powerful beings in the eastern spiral arm of the galaxy, rose from their seats and bowed deeply. "You may be seated," Vela said, her voice calm despite the storm brewing within her. She took her place at the head of the ancient stone table, carved from the first mountain of Dathria over 10,000 years ago. High Commander Torque, her most trusted advisor, leaned forward. "Your Majesty, the Council awaits your important announcement." Vela looked around the room. These were her most loyal subjects, beings who had served the royal line for centuries. Yet even they would struggle with what she was about to reveal. "I carry new life within me," she announced. Murmurs of joy and congratulations began around the table. The continuation of the royal bloodline was always cause for celebration. A 1,000-year dynasty would live on. Vela raised her hand, silencing them. "The child I carry is half human." The room froze. Commander Torque's jaw literally dropped open, his mandibles clicking in shock. Minister Lund's color drained from bright orange to pale yellow. Across the table, Science Director Pell's third eye snapped open, something that happened only in moments of extreme surprise. "Human," Torque finally managed to say. "The primitive species. The newcomers." "The same," Vela confirmed. Humans had only achieved space travel a century ago. In the vast timeline of galactic civilization, they were barely more than children. Most advanced species viewed them as curiosities at best, potential threats at worst. Their short lifespans and emotional decision-making were seen as weaknesses by the long-lived races that dominated galactic politics. "This is impossible," Science Director Pell stated, all 3 eyes now wide open. "Dathrian and human DNA cannot combine. Our biological structures are too different." "And yet it has happened," Vela said, touching her abdomen, where the first signs of swelling had appeared. "The Royal Medical Team has confirmed it." Minister Lund found her voice. "Your Majesty, who is the father?" "Ambassador Riley of Earth," Vela replied simply. The reaction was immediate. Gasps, hisses, and the sound of metal claws scratching on stone filled the room. Ambassador Riley was well known to the Council. The tall, serious-faced human had arrived 6 months ago as part of Earth's first diplomatic mission to Dathria. "This news will shock the galaxy," Security Chief Farr warned. "Our enemies will see it as weakness. Our allies will question your judgment." "I am aware of the political implications," Vela replied, her back straightening. "That is precisely why I have gathered you here first. We must plan how to present this to our people and to the Galactic Union." Trade Minister Mox, always practical, raised a webbed hand. "The treaties with the Central World specifically mention keeping royal bloodlines pure. The economic fallout could be severe." "The religious implications are equally troubling," added spiritual guide Zen. "The ancient texts speak of maintaining our sacred essence. Many will view this as sacrilege." Vela listened to their concerns, one after another. She had expected this reaction. For thousands of years, the great species of the galaxy had maintained careful separation in matters of reproduction. Cross-species relationships existed, of course, but they were seen as curiosities, interesting social arrangements that could never result in offspring. "The child grows stronger each day," Vela finally said when they had all spoken. "Our doctors cannot explain it, but they confirm the DNA has merged in ways previously thought impossible. This child represents something new in our galaxy." Commander Torque, loyal despite his shock, stood. "Whatever your decision, Your Majesty, I stand with you, but we must act quickly. News this big cannot stay secret for long." As if summoned by his words, a young messenger burst into the chamber, breaking all protocols of royal etiquette. "Forgive me," she gasped, "but the news has already reached the capital city. Crowds are gathering outside the palace. And we've received urgent communications from 15 Galactic Union worlds. Vela rose from her seat, her royal robes flowing around her. Then we have no time to waste. The galaxy will have its answers, but on my terms. The new era had begun, ready or not. 6 months earlier, the royal landing pad of Dathria's capital city buzzed with activity. Palace staff rushed to prepare for the arrival of the first official human delegation. Guards with gleaming armor stood at attention, their weapons polished but visible, a subtle reminder of Dathrian power. Queen Vela watched from her private balcony as the small Earth ship descended through the pink morning clouds. Unlike the elegant curved vessels of most advanced species, the human craft was boxy and practical, covered in visible engines and communication arrays. "Primitive design," remarked Commander Torque, standing at her side. "I'm surprised it made the journey at all." "Yet it did," Vela replied. "Perhaps there's something to be said for simple solutions." The ship landed with a heavy thud that made several court officials wince. When the door opened, 5 humans emerged, blinking in the bright light of Dathria's twin suns. Ambassador Jack Riley led the group. He was tall for a human, with short brown hair and a serious face. Unlike his companions who stared open-mouthed at the massive crystal towers of the capital, Riley's eyes found Vela immediately. He gave a respectful nod before descending the ramp. The formal reception was stiff and awkward. Humans lacked the natural grace of Dathrians, and their attempts at the traditional greeting dance were almost painful to watch. Riley, however, surprised everyone by skipping the dance entirely. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing instead. "On behalf of Earth, I thank you for this opportunity. We come with respect for your customs, but I won't insult you by pretending to master in minutes what your people spend years perfecting." Several gasps came from the court officials. Such directness was considered rude in Dathrian culture, where politeness often meant hours of ritual before reaching the point. Yet Vela found herself hiding a smile. "Refreshing," she said. "Come, Ambassador. We have prepared quarters for your team." Over the following weeks, the human delegation worked tirelessly to establish trade agreements. Other species had dismissed humans as too new to the galactic stage. But Vela saw potential. Earth metals were unusually pure, their art was vibrant with emotion. And most importantly, humans were willing to work on terms that older, more established species considered beneath them. Riley proved different from any diplomat Vela had met in her 300 years. Where Dathrian politics moved slowly through layers of tradition, Riley was direct. When court officials tried to bury important details in beautiful but meaningless language, he would cut through with simple questions. "Why not just say what you mean?" he asked Vela during their 4th private meeting. They sat in the royal garden, surrounded by floating blue flowers that changed color with the wind. "Because in royal politics, Ambassador, words are weapons," she explained. "Direct speech can cause direct offense." "Call me Jack," he said, breaking protocol again. And on Earth, unclear speech often causes the biggest problems. Their meetings grew longer, extending past diplomatic discussions into personal conversations. Vela found herself fascinated by human history, so brief compared to Dathrian millennia, yet filled with dramatic changes and innovations. Jack, in turn, asked endless questions about Dathrian culture and biology. "Your species lives for centuries," he said one evening as they walked along the crystal balconies of the West Wing. "You've seen technology change, empires rise and fall. I can't imagine that perspective." "And I can't imagine your human drive," she replied. "Perhaps it comes from your shorter lives. You accomplish in decades what takes other species centuries." Something changed between them that night. A line was crossed when their hands touched briefly while watching the sunset. Both knew it was inappropriate. A royal queen and a junior diplomat from an unproven species. Both knew the massive political complications. Both chose to ignore them. Their relationship developed in secret, hidden from court officials and Jack's own team. They met in forgotten corners of the ancient palace, talking for hours about their different worlds. "This can't lead anywhere," Jack said after their first kiss, his practical human mind already seeing the problems ahead. Perhaps not, Vela agreed, her scales glowing slightly in the darkness, a Dathrian sign of emotion that she couldn't control. But I find myself unwilling to stop. Neither of them could have predicted the biological miracle that would result from their union. A pregnancy that should have been scientifically impossible, that would soon shock the entire galaxy and change the course of interstellar relations forever. Dr. Morn stared at the test results for the 5th time, his spotted hands trembling slightly. As royal physician to Queen Vela for over 50 years, he had never faced a medical situation this unprecedented. The laboratory around him hummed with the most advanced diagnostic equipment in the Eastern Spiral Arm, yet the results defied all established science. "Run it again," he ordered his assistant. "Doctor, we've run it 7 times already," replied the younger Dathrian, her scales shifting to a concerned blue tone. "The results are consistent." Dr. Morn sank into his chair. "Then it's true. The Queen is carrying a human hybrid child." The news had spread through the palace medical staff like wildfire, though a royal command kept it contained within those walls. For now, the door slid open, and Queen Vela entered. Though she maintained her regal posture, Dr. Morn noticed the slight protective way her hand rested on her abdomen. "Your Majesty," he bowed deeply. "Tell me everything, Doctor," Vela said, dispensing with formalities. "Is the child healthy? How is this even possible?" Dr. Morn gestured to the 3-dimensional cellular projection floating above his desk. "The child appears healthy, yes. As for how, I cannot fully explain it." He manipulated the projection, expanding it to show strings of DNA coding. Human and Dathrian genetic structures should be completely incompatible. Our base amino acids are different. Our cellular reproduction methods have no common evolutionary pathway. By every principle of galactic biology, this pregnancy should not exist. Yet it does, Vela said simply. "Yes," Dr. Moore nodded. "The best theory we have involves the unique properties of human DNA. Unlike most species, human genetics contain unusual adaptive sequences, leftover code from their rapid evolution on Earth." He zoomed in on a particular strand. "These sequences appear to have bonded with your royal Dathrian DNA in ways we've never seen before, almost as if the human genetic material recognized compatible aspects of your DNA and built bridges to connect them." "Is this dangerous for the Queen?" asked Commander Torque, who had been standing silently by the door. Dr. Morn hesitated. "We cannot be certain. This is uncharted territory. However, all vital signs appear stable, and the embryo is developing at a predictable rate, faster than Dathrian gestation, but slower than human." Queen Vela touched the floating projection, watching as it rippled around her fingers. "The father must be informed." "Ambassador Riley left Dathria 3 weeks ago," Torque reminded her. "The human delegation returned to Earth after the trade agreements were signed." "Then send a direct communication," Vela ordered. "This concerns him as much as it does me." Before Torque could respond, the laboratory's communication panel lit up with urgent messages. Dr. Morn rushed to check them. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice tight, "someone has leaked information about your condition. The Galactic Science Academy is demanding confirmation. The Central Worlds Council has called an emergency session, and 17 different research institutions are requesting permission to study the pregnancy." Vela's scales darkened with anger. "Who leaked this information?" "Unknown, Your Majesty. But the news is spreading across all galactic networks." The laboratory doors burst open as Minister Lund rushed in. "The capital is in chaos. Religious groups are gathering at the temple squares. Some call it a miracle, others an abomination. And 3 ships from the Galactic Medical Authority have entered our orbit without permission." Queen Vela stood tall, her royal authority filling the room. "It seems secrecy is no longer an option. Prepare my ship. I will address the people directly." As the royal staff rushed to obey, Dr. Morn approached the Queen privately. "There's something else, Your Majesty. Something I didn't want to share in front of the others." He showed her another scan. This one focused on the developing embryo's brain patterns. "The neural activity is extraordinary, higher than either human or Dathrian norms at this stage. If these readings are accurate, the child may possess capabilities beyond either parent species." Vela stared at the scan, a mix of wonder and concern crossing her face. "A new kind of being." "Yes," Dr. Morn agreed, "and that's precisely what terrifies the galaxy. This child challenges everything we thought we knew about species barriers. If humans can produce offspring with Dathrians, what other combinations might be possible? The entire evolutionary hierarchy of the Galactic Union could be undermined." As Queen Vela prepared to face her people halfway across the galaxy, Jack Riley received an encrypted message on his private communicator. His face paled as he read the simple words, "Impossible has happened. We created life. Return to Dathria." The universe would never be the same. The great chamber of the Galactic Union fell into chaos. Thousands of representatives from 500 worlds shouted, hissed, buzzed, and flashed light patterns in their native forms of agitated communication. The semicircular room, designed to promote harmony with its neutral beige walls and perfect acoustics, now amplified the sounds of discord. At the center of the storm stood a holographic projection of Queen Vela, her image transmitted from Dathria across vast distances. Even as a hologram, she maintained her royal dignity, despite the noise. "Order," boomed the voice of High Arbiter Xol, the ancient Vox leader whose crystalline body had presided over the council for 3 centuries. His voice, amplified through resonance chambers, sliced through the cacophony. "We will conduct this emergency session with proper decorum." The chamber gradually quieted. Representatives settled back into their environmentally customized seating pods. "Queen Vela of Dathria," Sol continued, his crystal facets glowing with formal blue light. "You have been summoned to explain this biological anomaly. Is it true you carry a hybrid child with human DNA?" "It is true," Vela's hologram replied simply. New murmurs swept the chamber until Xol raised his crystalline arm for silence. "This violates the natural order conventions signed after the species wars," declared Ambassador Grath of the Numerine Clouds, his gaseous form swirling with angry red patterns. "For 8,000 years, the advanced species of this galaxy have maintained biological separation to prevent evolutionary chaos." Queen Vela's scales shimmered slightly, a subtle sign of anger that only those familiar with Dathrian biology would recognize. "I have violated no convention," she responded. "The Natural Order Agreement prohibits artificial genetic manipulation between species. This child was conceived naturally." "Impossible," shouted a representative from the insectoid hive worlds. "Dathrian and human genetic codes cannot naturally combine." Science Minister Relix of the Solarian Republic floated forward in his gravity pod. "Yet our preliminary analysis confirms the Queen's claim. This appears to be a natural conception, not laboratory work. Most fascinating. Natural or not, it threatens the established order," rumbled Elder Dune of the Silicon Collective, one of the oldest species in the Union. "If humans can breed with ancient races, what becomes of our evolutionary hierarchies? What becomes of the careful balance of power we've maintained for millennia?" The human delegation sat quietly in their section, looking uncomfortable under the hostile glares of many elder species. As the newest members of the Galactic Union, they held little political power, but suddenly found themselves at the center of a cosmic controversy. Ambassador Lin, Earth's senior representative, finally stood. Though dwarfed by the massive aliens surrounding her, her voice carried clearly. "The Union Charter guarantees bodily sovereignty to all sentient beings," she stated. "Queen Vela's pregnancy, while unexpected, falls under this protection. No council vote can force termination of the child." "This isn't about one child," bellowed Representative Krull from the Warriors Alliance. "This is about the future of galactic order. If humans can breed with Dathrians, what's to stop them from producing hybrids with other species? Their adaptable DNA could spread through our carefully maintained genetic lines like a virus. Queen Vela's hologram remained steady. My medical team confirms this is an extremely rare occurrence, possibly unique to specific genetic markers in both myself and the human father. It does not indicate widespread compatibility. The chamber erupted again as dozens of representatives tried to speak at once. Through the chaos, Elder Tinax of the Philosophical Collective, known for their 1,000-year perspective, floated to the center floor. Perhaps their melodic voice somehow cut through the noise. We are witnessing not a threat, but an evolution of our understanding. The universe rarely fits into the neat categories we create. Arbiter Sol's crystals pulsed with irritation. Philosophy aside, this council must decide how to respond. The Treaty of Seven Moons gives us authority to intervene in matters that threaten galactic stability. Are you suggesting, Queen Vela's voice turned dangerously cold, that the Galactic Union intends to invade Dathria over my pregnancy? The room fell silent at the implication. No one had directly mentioned military action, but the threat hung in the air. Ambassador Lin spoke again. Earth stands with Dathria on this matter. Any action against Queen Vela will be considered an act of war against humanity as well. The younger species, those who had joined the Union in the last millennium, began pledging support for Dathria and Earth. Meanwhile, elder species huddled in urgent consultation. As the alliances visibly shifted across the chamber, Arbiter Xal's crystalline form dimmed slightly, a sign of deep concern. This session will recess for 12 standard hours, he announced. When we return, the Council will vote on official response measures. As the transmission ended, Queen Vela turned to Commander Torque, who stood off-camera. Prepare our defenses, she ordered quietly. The galaxy is taking sides. Part 5. Assassination attempts. The Royal Gardens of Dathria, once a place of peace for Queen Vela, had become another security checkpoint. Guards patrolled among the floating flowers, their weapons no longer ceremonial. Hidden scanners swept constantly for threats, and the clear dome overhead had been reinforced with military-grade shields. Vela sat on a stone bench, her growing abdomen now visible beneath her royal robes. 4 months had passed since her announcement to the Galactic Union, and life had become increasingly dangerous. Your Majesty, Commander Torque approached with a tight expression. We've captured another assassin. Vela sighed, touching the small scar on her neck, a reminder of how close the first attempt had come. Which faction this time? Purist Order, Torque replied. They planted an agent among the kitchen staff. The poison was designed to target the developing embryo while leaving you unharmed. How considerate of them, Vela said bitterly. The doors to the garden slid open, and Security Chief Vera hurried in. His scales had dulled from lack of sleep. He hadn't rested properly since the second assassination attempt 3 weeks ago, when a disguised maintenance drone had nearly reached the Queen's chambers. Your Majesty, we've detected an unauthorized ship entering Dathrian atmosphere, he reported. It's not responding to hails. Torque's hand went to his weapon. Another attack. No, Vela said, rising to her feet. It's Ambassador Riley. Both officials stared at her. How could you possibly know that? Var asked. The Queen's inner eyelids flickered. A Dathrian smile. I recognize the energy signature of his ship. The human delegation uses distinct propulsion technology. Indeed, minutes later, Jack Riley was escorted into the garden by a squad of nervous guards. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and several days' growth of facial hair. Jack, Vela said, forgetting royal protocol in her surprise. The Galactic Union revoked your travel permission. How did you get through the blockade? Flew beneath their sensor grid, he replied, his eyes fixed on her abdomen. Human ships may be primitive by your standards, but we're good at staying undetected when we need to. Commander Torque stepped forward. Ambassador, you've violated multiple security protocols. Your presence here could be viewed as an Earth government operation. I'm not here as an ambassador, Jack said firmly. Earth officially ordered me to stay away. Called it too politically sensitive. I resigned my position. Vela's scales brightened with emotion. You gave up your career. Some things matter more, he said simply, then turned to Torque. I understand you've had security breaches. I want to help. Torque scoffed. No offense, human, but Dathrian security is the most advanced in the sector. And yet 3 assassination attempts have nearly succeeded, Jack countered. You're thinking like Dathrians, using advanced technology and elaborate protocols. But your enemies know those systems. They've studied them for centuries. And what do you propose? Var asked skeptically. Human methods, Jack said. Unpredictable, improvised, sometimes crude, but effective because they're unexpected. Before the discussion could continue, the garden's alarm system blared. Red emergency lights bathed the flowers in crimson. Perimeter breach in Sector 7. Shouted a guard through the communication system. Multiple hostiles. Security Chief Ver's communicator displayed a holographic map showing a dozen red dots moving through the palace grounds. How did they get past the shields? Torque demanded. They didn't, Jack said, pointing to the map. Look at their entry point. They came from below. They've been tunneling. Vela's guards surrounded her immediately, forming a protective circle as Torque barked orders into his communicator. The safe room is compromised if they've breached the lower levels, Var realized with horror. We need to move the Queen off-site. No, Jack interrupted. That's exactly what they expect. They've probably set up ambush points along all evacuation routes. He turned to Vela. Do you trust me? The Queen looked into his eyes for a long moment, then nodded. Then we go up, not down, Jack said. Is there access to the maintenance areas for the crystal spires? Yes, but they're not secure, Torque objected. Exactly why no one will look for us there, Jack explained. In human military history, the best hiding place is often somewhere so obvious that enemies think you'd never choose it. The sound of weapons fire echoed from somewhere in the palace. We don't have time to debate, Vela decided. Commander Torque, take 4 guards and create a diversion toward the evacuation route. Security Chief Ver, you and 2 others will accompany us to the maintenance shafts. As they hurried through hidden service corridors, Jack stayed close to Vela. I should have been here sooner, he said quietly. Vela's hand brushed against his. You're here now. Our child will need both of us to survive what's coming. Behind them, explosions rocked the palace foundations. The 3rd assassination attempt had failed, but all of them knew it wouldn't be the last. Part 6. Birth amid crisis. The Royal Medical Chamber gleamed with sterile light. What was once a peaceful healing space had been transformed into a fortress. Armored barriers covered the windows. Guards checked everyone who entered, even the royal physician. Security systems hummed constantly, scanning for threats. Queen Vela lay on the medical pod, her breathing steady despite the pain. After 8 months of pregnancy, longer than human gestation but shorter than Dathrian, the moment had arrived. Her scales had taken on a bright pearl-like glow, a sign that birth was imminent. Everything is proceeding normally, Your Majesty, said Dr. Morn, studying the medical readouts. The child's vital signs are strong. Jack paced nervously nearby, looking out of place among the tall Dathrians. For the past 3 months, he had barely left Vela's side, helping reorganize palace security with unpredictable human tactics that had frustrated further assassination attempts. The timing is unfortunate, Commander Torque said grimly, looking at a security display. The planetary aurora has begun. The aurora was a natural phenomenon that occurred twice each Dathrian year, when magnetic storms interfered with shield technology and communications. Usually, it was celebrated with festivals. Today, it created dangerous vulnerabilities. Dr. Morn turned toward Vela as she gasped sharply. The birthing process has begun, he announced. Everyone except medical staff must leave the chamber. I'm staying, Jack said, moving to Vela's side and taking her hand. Dr. Morn started to object, but stopped when he saw the Queen nod. As the first contractions intensified, the palace alarm system suddenly blared. "What now?" Jack demanded. Security Chief Ver burst into the room, his scales pale with stress. "Separatist warships have appeared in orbit. 6 vessels, heavily armed. How did they get past our detection systems?" Torque asked. "The Aurora," Ver explained. "They used the magnetic interference to mask their approach. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, demanding we surrender the abomination when it's born." Vela cried out as another contraction hit, stronger than the first. "We need to focus on the birth," Dr. Morn insisted. "Politics can wait." A tremendous boom shook the palace, sending dust drifting from the ceiling. "That was a warning shot," Var reported, checking his communicator. "They're threatening to bombard the capital if we don't comply." Jack's face hardened with determination. "How many civilians in the potential impact zone?" "Approximately 3 million, Torque replied. "We can't risk their lives," Vela gasped between contractions. Jack moved closer to her. "I have an idea. It's unconventional, but it might work." "Your human ideas have saved me 3 times already," Vela said with a pained smile. "Tell us." "They want to destroy this child before anyone sees it," Jack explained. "They fear what it represents, so let's show everyone. Broadcast the birth across all galactic channels." The Dathrians stared at him in shock. "That would violate every royal privacy protocol," Dr. Morn protested. "Exactly," Jack nodded. "It's so contrary to Dathrian custom that the Separatists won't expect it. And once billions of beings witness the birth of a healthy child, public opinion will shift dramatically." Vela cried out again as her contractions intensified. "The birth is progressing quickly," Dr. Morn warned. "We must decide now." "Do it," Vela commanded through gritted teeth. "Broadcast everything." While the medical team prepared for the birth, Torque and Ver worked frantically to override the communication security protocols. Within minutes, they had established a galaxy-wide broadcast channel. "Then we go up, not down," Jack said. "Is there access to the maintenance areas for the crystal spires?" "Yes, but they're not secure," Torque objected. "Exactly why no one will look for us there," Jack explained. "In human military history, the best hiding place is often somewhere so obvious that enemies think you'd never choose it." The sound of weapons fire echoed from somewhere in the palace. "We don't have time to debate," Vela decided. "Commander Torque, take 4 guards and create a diversion toward the evacuation route. Security Chief Ver, you and 2 others will accompany us to the maintenance shafts." As they hurried through hidden service corridors, Jack stayed close to Vela. "I should have been here sooner," he said quietly. Vela's hand brushed against his. "You're here now. Our child will need both of us to survive what's coming." Behind them, explosions rocked the palace foundations. The 3rd assassination attempt had failed, but all of them knew it wouldn't be the last. Part 6. Birth amid crisis. The Royal Medical Chamber gleamed with stereo light. What was once a peaceful healing space had been transformed into a fortress. Armored barriers covered the windows. Guards checked everyone who entered, even the royal physician. Security systems hummed constantly, scanning for threats. Queen Vela lay on the medical pod, her breathing steady despite the pain. After 8 months of pregnancy, longer than human gestation, but shorter than Dathrian, the moment had arrived. Her scales had taken on a bright pearl-like glow, a sign that birth was imminent. "Everything is proceeding normally, Your Majesty," said Dr. Morn, studying the medical readouts. "The child's vital signs are strong." Jack paced nervously nearby, looking out of place among the tall Dathrians. For the past 3 months, he had barely left Vela's side, helping reorganize palace security with unpredictable human tactics that had frustrated further assassination attempts. "The timing is unfortunate," Commander Torque said grimly, looking at a security display. "The planetary aurora has begun." The aurora was a natural phenomenon that occurred twice each Dathrian year, when magnetic storms interfered with shield technology and communications. Usually, it was celebrated with festivals. Today, it created dangerous vulnerabilities. Dr. Morn turned toward Vila as she gasped sharply. "The birthing process has begun," he announced. "Everyone except medical staff must leave the chamber." "I'm staying," Jack said, moving to Vela's side and taking her hand. Dr. Morn started to object but stopped when he saw the Queen nod. As the first contractions intensified, the palace alarm system suddenly blared. "What now?" Jack demanded. Security Chief Ver burst into the room, his scales pale with stress. "Separatist warships have appeared in orbit, 6 vessels, heavily armed." "How did they get past our detection systems?" Torque asked. "The Aurora," Ver explained. "They used the magnetic interference to mask their approach. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, demanding we surrender the abomination when it's born." Vela cried out as another contraction hit, stronger than the first. "We need to focus on the birth," Dr. Morn insisted. "Politics can wait." A tremendous boom shook the palace, sending dust drifting from the ceiling. "That was a warning shot," Var reported, checking his communicator. "They're threatening to bombard the capital if we don't comply." Jack's face hardened with determination. "How many civilians in the potential impact zone?" "Approximately 3 million, Torque replied. "We can't risk their lives." Vela gasped between contractions. Jack moved closer to her. "I have an idea. It's unconventional, but it might work." "Your human ideas have saved me 3 times already," Vela said with a pained smile. "Tell us." "They want to destroy this child before anyone sees it," Jack explained. "They fear what it represents, so let's show everyone. Broadcast the birth across all galactic channels." The Dathrians stared at him in shock. "That would violate every royal privacy protocol," Dr. Morn protested. "Exactly," Jack nodded. "It's so contrary to Dathrian custom that the Separatists won't expect it. And once billions of beings witness the birth of a healthy child, public opinion will shift dramatically." Vela cried out again as her contractions intensified. "The birth is progressing quickly," Dr. Morn warned. "We must decide now." "Do it," Vela commanded through gritted teeth. "Broadcast everything." While the medical team prepared for the birth, Torque and Ver worked frantically to override the communication security protocols. Within minutes, they had established a galaxy-wide broadcast channel. 1 year later, the great chamber of the Galactic Union buzzed with anticipation. The circular space, once a battleground of angry words and threats, now hummed with curious energy. Representatives from 500 worlds leaned forward in their environmental pods, all eyes focused on the central platform. Queen Vela stood tall, her royal robes shimmering with ceremonial gems. Beside her stood Jack, dressed in a formal human Dathrian hybrid outfit that symbolized his unique position, not quite a king, but more than a consort. In Vela's arms, Princess Lyra looked around with bright, curious eyes. The child had grown faster than either human or Dathrian infants normally would. At 1 year old, she already had the coordination of a 3-year-old human and the cognitive development of a young Dathrian. Her skin glittered with soft scales that changed color with her emotions, currently a bright gold of excitement. "Representatives of the Galactic Union," Vela began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber. 1 year ago, many of you demanded the termination of my pregnancy. Some called my daughter an abomination before she was even born. Today, I invite you to witness what you nearly destroyed." She gently set Lyra down on the platform. The child stood confidently, her balance perfect. "Show them, little one," Jack encouraged softly. Princess Lyra raised her small hand toward a crystal sculpture decorating the chamber. The crystal, which normally required special tools to shape, began to bend slightly, responding to some invisible force emanating from the child. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The ability to manipulate crystal structures with bioelectric fields was a rare Dathrian trait that typically took decades to develop. Yet Lyra controlled it instinctively. Impressive, but not unexpected from royal Dathrian blood, commented Elder Dune of the Silicon Collective, one of the former vocal opponents of the pregnancy. Jack smiled. Now show them your other gift, Lyra. The child closed her eyes in concentration. The scales on her skin suddenly changed pattern, forming complex mathematical equations that shifted and solved themselves across her body. This was no Dathrian ability. It was an entirely new adaptation combining human neuroplasticity with Dathrian biological displays. The Science Academy has confirmed that Princess Lyra's genetic structure is stable, Dr. Morn announced, stepping forward with research data projecting behind him. Moreover, the combination of human adaptive DNA with Dathrian regenerative capabilities has created cellular resilience previously unknown in either species. A single exceptional child doesn't change the natural order, argued Ambassador Grath of the Numarine Clouds, though his voice lacked its former hostility. Perhaps not, agreed Vela, but she is not alone. At her signal, the chamber doors opened. 20 couples entered, each pair consisting of different species. A human woman with a tall Solarian, a Hive World representative walking hand in tentacle with a Silicon Collective engineer. Species that had maintained rigid separation for thousands of years now stood together. Since Lyra's birth, these couples and many others have come forward, Jack explained. They've been living in secret, hiding their relationships for fear of persecution. Some have even been attempting to have children, but without proper medical support, they've been unsuccessful. With the research we've gained from Princess Lyra's development, Dr. Morn continued, we've identified compatible genetic markers across multiple species. Not all can produce offspring naturally, but with minimal medical assistance, many more combinations are possible than we ever imagined. A murmur ran through the chamber as the implications became clear. Science Minister Relix floated forward in his gravity pod. Our preliminary studies suggest that cross-species offspring may develop unique capabilities that neither parent species possesses. We may be witnessing the beginning of an entirely new evolutionary pathway. You speak of changing the foundation of our galactic society. Elder Doom protested, but with less conviction than before. No, Vela replied calmly. We speak of expanding it. Jack stepped forward. Throughout human history, our greatest strengths came from diversity, of ideas, of cultures, of genetic backgrounds. Perhaps the same is true on a galactic scale. Little Lyra, bored with the adult conversation, began creating small floating lights between her fingers, another new ability neither humans nor Dathrians possessed. The future will be different, Vela acknowledged, watching her daughter with pride. But different doesn't mean worse. After all, the stars themselves were once just scattered elements that combined to create something greater than their parts. Around the chamber, younger species began to signal their support. Even some elder races, seeing the remarkable child and the research data, showed signs of reconsidering their positions. As the formal proposal for new cross-species medical research and protection laws came to a vote, Princess Lyra looked up at her parents and smiled, a perfectly human expression on her Dathrian-scaled face. She represented not just the union of two people, but a new possibility for an entire galaxy. The universe, vast and ancient as it was, still had room to evolve. And sometimes, evolution began with a single, impossible child.